الذين آمنوا وتطمئن قلوبهم بذكر الله ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Chaudhry Ijaz-ur-Rehman Sahib. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm looking forward very much to this conversation that we're going to have today. But before we go into the conversation, I want to ask, who are you?
Wa alaikum assalam. I'm Dr. Ijaz-ur-Rehman. I am a consultant psychiatrist with South London and Maudsley NHS Trust for the last 20 years. I graduated in 1987 and moved to the UK in 2003.
Jazakallah, thank you. And outside of your profession as a psychiatrist and consultant, tell me something a bit more personal about you.
I have been married 30 years this year. I've got 4 children. My eldest son is a corporate lawyer. The next is a daughter who is married. She's a doctor. And the next is another daughter who is in final year UCL Medical School looking to get married. And the youngest one is a son at AS levels.
Inshallah. So we are in the month of Ramadan. And the month of Ramadan, obviously there's a big focus on the Holy Quran and its words and its interpretations and its meanings. And a lot of people find inspiration from this. Now, you brought with you today a verse from the Holy Quran, and it's from chapter 13, verse 29. And I'll paraphrase. It says, "Surely in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find peace." Now, I want you to explain why you brought that verse with you today, why you felt it was important to bring that verse and what it means to you.
The reason I brought that verse is that in the field of psychiatry, where lots of atheists and people who do not believe in religion are there has been research over the last 30, 40 years, much more in the last 20 years, which now proves what Holy Quran said 1400 years ago. It has been proven with research that people who have some kind of belief have better outcomes when they have a psychiatric illness, and in terms of prevention as well, they have more chances of not developing a mental illness.
So then the people that do go into mental health hospitals or fall into a mental health illness with religion, what tends to be the reason behind that then? Because I'm guessing there ultimately would be some people that have a belief.
The illness is there.
Yeah.
The illness is there. Yeah. It is an illness like any other physical illness. So mental illnesses are the same as physical health illnesses. Yeah. However, the outcomes can be different. So if a person who has no belief at all, and you compare the outcomes with a person who has some belief, the outcomes, the research has shown that the outcomes are better. Why they are better? They're trying to find out in their own words, whether it is spirituality, whether it is religion, and they try defining spirituality and religion differently.
From your understanding though, what do you believe is the reason for this? Why do you believe that having a religious background or some sort of form of belief helps people come out better from a mental health issue?
I think human beings many a times do not realize the limitations that they have, the limitations in what they can do and they cannot do and achieve. So they have setbacks. They normally would have setbacks in life. They would have problems, they would have frustrations, which would then lead to problems in the mind in how they think and how they then react to those. People who have belief have normally in a belief in a higher being. So Islam teaches us that there is Allah the Almighty, and if you believe in Allah the Almighty, you would believe in that whatever happens for a reason, and you can pray to Allah the Almighty to change if something is destined for you. And that essentially gives reason for people to have hope and not lose hope.
So then ultimately those who don't have this belief or this a belief or some sort of spiritual or religious backing, when they fall into a mental health issue, then they can't find that reason, or they sort of ruminate over the issue and think, why is this happening to myself? Whereas those who do have a belief system think, okay, this has come from God, or God has some sort of plan behind this. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And
it allows them to rationalize, as they say, better in comparison to. So, for example, if I only rely on myself, I feel that there is no one, no superior being, no religion, it is only me and I do and everything I'm responsible for. So if there are failures, if there are difficulties, if I'm banging my head against the wall, not being able to achieve something, the frustration is on me. So you start becoming pessimistic at times and start losing hope. Whereas if you have a belief, you may find the same difficulties, but the coping mechanisms you would use would become different. So the maladaptive coping strategies would not be there.
And you find yourself speaking to this ultimate being or this higher being and finding answers from him, or reaching out to him to find a solution for you.
And then you see that if you try it for yourself, if you have a belief, if you have belief in God, and if you believe that there is life hereafter, then this life becomes only temporary. And whatever you do has a different meaning then, that you want to take something forward. So it makes you a better person overall, less likely to get into vices, less likely to get into problems and difficulties, which somebody who just believes that this is the life they have and they need to enjoy it to the best of their abilities.
Okay, that's very interesting. You've mentioned that, those who have belief tend to come out from a mental health issue better, and you've given some of the reasons for that as well. But I want to ask, what sort of components of Islam, in the more practical sense, what sort of tenets of Islam and elements of Islam help build that resilience and being able to cope with mental health issues? What sort of practical elements are there in Islam that help with that?
I think if you look at Islam, it is a complete code of conduct of life, and it helps you to structure your day, right, starting from offering 5 prayers a day, keeping yourself clean, praying to Allah the Almighty, doing good to others. Essentially, as I said, fasting is another example. It is month of Ramadan, and fasting teaches you to have forbearance for others and people who are hungry. It is easier for us to understand how they cope in their day-to-day life, and possibly help us to help them more.
I've also found that during Ramadan, it's a practice of willpower, isn't it? It's your as you mentioned, forbearance, and is proving to yourself that if I can stop myself from eating for a whole day, which is one of the basic necessities of life, then surely I can stop myself from many other sins that can cause me to go into any other issues. What other elements do you believe, or do you believe that there's some practices? And I'm just thinking from the top of my head, for example, this is an example that I sometimes give to members of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. But when it comes to namaz, we are advised in Islam to pray 5 times a day. And what I believe is that we are commanded, men especially, to read in congregation. We have to read in congregation where we can. And what I find is that if you follow that instruction and you pray your prayers 5 times a day in congregation, if you're having a bad day, what's the likelihood that you're not going to meet someone that can brighten your day? Because one of the issues, I'm sure you're aware, is when people have mental health issues, they tend to keep to themselves. They don't want to open up about it. And when they go to the mosque, they meet people, they start to talk about their issues. Do you think that this concept in Islam has been made, there's with this sort of my thinking, is there a reason behind praying in congregation? Could this be a reason to help us?
It certainly would help. Essentially, as I said, it gives you a sense of community. It gives you meeting other people 5 times a day. and maybe different people, because not everyone would be able to go and offer salat in congregation all the time. So maybe on if you are able to do that on different times, you might feel different people, and the possibility of connecting with people like your own background are more, and it is possible that you may open up and you may find distraction from your problems.
We are finding more and more that mental health is becoming a topic of conversation. It's become a hot topic, you can say. And I don't know if it's possibly pop culture that's made it a hot topic, or maybe it's genuine reasons why it's becoming more of a conversation. People are suffering more. But what advice would you give to young people, I'd say healthy individuals as well, and people that might be struggling, to stay away from, to keep them away from a hospital, to keep them away from being sectioned and being put into a hospital? What sort of advice would you give to them?
I think the verse absolutely beautifully mentions that itself. Ala bi zikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. So I think it is in remembrance of Allah that the heart finds solace. And if you follow the religion, and if you offer your prayers every day, if you try not to sin to the best of your abilities, and if you do, when you do namaz, in your sajda, you pray to Allah the Almighty, you open your heart, if you really are trying to repent, I think that repentance essentially washes off the frustrations and the problems that you have got. So if you can beseech Allah the Almighty with all the emotions to forgive and take you out of your problems, that's a way that you can communicate. You mentioned the Southeast Asian community and the BME community as well. There's a lot of stigma attached to mental health. Nobody wants to talk about it. And so this is a good way that, yes, if you can find somebody to talk to and open up, please do open up. Talking always helps. The other bit is talking to Allah the Almighty, and that would immensely help as well. People in this busy life, when they are, as if they're running on a treadmill all the time, from one thing to another, and when they find it hard to cope, people go towards drugs. And I think that is the other thing I would strongly advise people to remain off. There is no drug which is helpful. All of these affect your mental health adversely. I think if you are able to follow the religion, it will help you maintain positive mental health. Exercise is another good thing, regular exercise, going out. And I think a mosque or any Jamaat center does provide you a platform. Some people lack in their confidence. And if you are engaged in the Jamaat from a young age, and I'm telling people who've got kids, that if you take your children and get them attached to the Jamaat, to Majlis al-Tafalul Ahmadiyya, Khudamul Ahmadiyya, you see doing speeches, engaging in healthy activities all around, it makes them a better person overall. They are able to interact better with each other.
Yeah, I entirely agree. I do believe that our auxiliary organizations at Atfal al-Ahmadiyya and Khudam al-Ahmadiyya are pivotal in developing us.
Not to take away Nasaratul Ahmadiyya and Lajna
of course, yes. But I think they are absolutely essential and crucial in our development. And for me, especially growing up, it's been the core part of my life growing up. So I think it's very important that you've mentioned that these things do develop us and they help us to be stronger, well-rounded individuals in society. I want to ask about what generally is the root cause of mental health issues. And so from my understanding, it is some form of trauma. So it can stem from a trauma. There's obviously other issues as well, but generally I've always understood that many mental health issues stem from some form of trauma. It could be any form of trauma. Now, again, I believe, or I could be wrong in this, but my understanding is that everyone at some point will go through a trauma in their life. And it could be as simple as losing a loved one. This is a trauma in itself. But then what do we do to ensure that trauma doesn't lead us to a mental health issue? Now you mentioned the verse and that remembering Allah would help us to be on the right path and help us stay away from mental health issues. But aside from that, I mean, that is the ultimate goal, but the ultimate advice. But within that advice, what sort of steps could young people do, even adults do, to prevent their trauma from becoming a mental health issue?
So there are many causes of mental illness. As I said, they can be biological, they can be environmental. So yes, trauma is one of the causes. And if you are focusing on trauma, so if you go through any kind of trauma, the best thing is to try to open up and talk about it rather than keeping it hidden. Because if you try putting it under the carpet or try forgetting it, it will be there, but it will go down the subconscious route, and then it will come up in various ways. So there's a good old saying that the sorrow which is not vent in tears makes other organs bleed. It is for somatization, what we call as. So yes, if there is a trauma, the best way to deal with that is talk to somebody about it, what has happened, how you feel about it, and how you can deal with that. But seeking advice early, whether it is professional or somebody who is your confidant and you can talk to them, you have a confiding relationship with, you can open up with them, it will lessen the impact and not allow it to become chronic and come up with problems later in life.
And I think that's a big issue, as you mentioned, in BME communities, and especially now South Asian communities are seen as some sort of not something to be spoken of. If anyone is suffering from something, leave them, they'll be fine, or keep them busy. But for those that do feel that they don't have an outlet, they don't have, you know, you mentioned someone that they can confide in. If they feel that they don't have anyone to confide in, that's sometimes where I think they might feel stuck. What do you think is the best route for them?
I think there are options available still. There are voluntary organizations that you could call. You could also talk to your Mudabbir. You could also talk to within the Jamaat as well, because Mudabbirs not only look after your religious well-being, but they are also the young ones, particularly educated here in Jamia UK, are very well versed with how things work, and they gel very easily with the youngsters. And I presume that we are talking more about the youngsters who find it more hard and to talk to somebody when the things go wrong. So that is also a neutral avenue which they can. Otherwise, as I said, go to your GP, have a chat with your GP, who can refer you to services and get you appropriate help.
I think also, though, it's an issue in the adult community as well, especially in the adult, again, we're mentioning South Asian community, because they're so ingrained in their way of life that they just think, okay, it's just a part of me now. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to even try and change. So what do we do about them? Because they may have families, they may have a wife or even a husband, but still they think, no, this is just how I am. And what can we say? What can we say to them?
I think it is in terms of slowly trying to explain to them. Sometimes you directly talk to them and the answer will be, this is the way I am, and that's what it is. I think engaging them in activities, getting them, if they have a family around them, getting them engaged more in family stuff, bringing them more outside of the family home, going to different events. And as I said, Jamaat provides a perfect outlet in those circumstances to people of all ages and both sexes. There are possibility that they may find something more interesting or a more purpose in life. If what we need to try doing them is finding them a purpose, finding them a motivation to get them out, to get them moving from that stale state which they have hit.
Jazakallah, Chaudhry Ijaz-ur-Rehman Sahib. I've found this conversation very enlightening, and hopefully it's helping, and it will help a lot of members of the community and outside of the community as well. I think it's a very, very important discussion. And thankfully, alhamdulillah, it's becoming more of a conversation, because people will be more aware that they could potentially have something that needs to be dealt with. And ultimately, then that would benefit their families and their lives and so on. So, Jazakallah, thank you so much for your time. And it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Jazakallah for having me.